retired. So, I mean, my dad's still on the farm, but he's
to virtually sign on, and then we'll get started.
And I mean, he's young enough to stay on the farm from having lived on the farm all his life, but still, it's just like, yeah.
Hello, everybody. I'm Shelley Reimer, City Administrator here at the City of Yamhill. Thank you all for coming and for agreeing to serve on the Citizen Advisory Committee for the grant that we are processing through here with 3J Consulting and Doug Rux and DLCD. And he'll go over the scope of work and the grants and what they entail. But we thought we would just start with some introductions, just your name and sort of your company or organization that you might be representing. If you don't know, I can tell you kind of the angle we were thinking of having your conversation. You're part of the conversation. So Jenny, do you want to kick us off and start us off?
Okay. Yes, so I'm Jenny Morrison. I live on Adcock Road, just a mile outside of the city limits, and lived out there for 20 years, my husband and I. I'm on the Economic Development Committee as well as with the Yamhill Downtown Association, and we're working on a coffee roasting business. We've had the small coffee roasting business for a couple of years now, and just kind of looking to find a place in town to get something going more permanently.
Thanks.
Ben Van Dyke Farms. I'm a third generation farm in this area, and I'm here, I think, representing my dad and uncle who, I guess, own some ground on the outside of town, and speak on the farmer behalf.
Thank you.
And I'm Pat Fitzgerald, and we also live on the outskirts of town. We have a horse farm there, and I'm one of the elected directors of the Yamhill Soil Conservation Service, and I'm part of the West Yamhill Water Company, who serves 30 users on the west side of town, and appreciate you inviting us all to be part of this process.
Thanks.
Philip Higgins, grew up here, commercial real estate broker and developer on the Yamhill Downtown Association and the Yamhill Economic Development Committee.
Kyle Adams. I work for the city of Yamhill doing plant operations for water treatment and wastewater treatment.
And I'm Jujetta Dumdai, longstanding member of the community, grew up here, and I'm representing kind of a lens of the school district and the school board. And then also my husband's family has some land that's on the outskirts of town also.
Mary Spencer, we own T&E's, or my parents do, and I run it, and have since 1976.
I'm Shay Corrigan. I'm on the city council of Yamhill. I live here in town. That's all.
And you served on the planning commission.
And I was on the planning commission before that.
And Steve?
Steve Faust, I'm the Community Planning Director at 3J Consulting. We are located in Beaverton. Excuse me. I'm a land use planner and do a lot of public involvement. Our firm also does civil engineering, although I don't think that'll be part of this project. I met with Jenny and I can't remember. Yeah, it was probably almost a year ago, I feel like, to talk about some of this potential project, and we kind of learned a lot along the way and eventually got to this point, so that's really exciting. Another member of the team you'll be meeting at our next meeting is not here today. His name's Doug Rux. Some of you might know him. I think he did some work with City Council, but Doug most recently was the planning director or the community development director for the city of Newburgh, and now he is he's working part-time for the city of Dundee, but also doing consulting as well. So he's got a lot of experience in this this region. And then my colleague Journey, want to go next, Journey?
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Journey Gehring. I'm an associate planner with 3J Consulting, and I'm assisting on this project. I mainly do long-range land use planning, and I also grew up in the Yamhill Carlton area, so pleased to be here.
Very nice.
Melissa?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm Melissa Ahrens. I'm the Mid-Willamette Valley Regional Representative with DLCD and also helping oversee the grant from DLCD side for this project.
Walt? Can you introduce yourself, Walt?
Oh, okay. Excuse me. Name's Walt Wondolowski. I'm the contract city planner for Yamhill, and I'm very pleased to be here this evening.
Great. Well, maybe we could go ahead and share that PowerPoint now.
Okay.
Probably going to stand a lot, but not quite yet. There we go. I will stand right now. So tonight, what we're going to do, thanks Shelley for leading those introductions, is give a little overview of what we're trying to accomplish with this project. Then I'm gonna walk through briefly our scope of work and our schedule for the work. We've prepared a public engagement plan, which we sent to you, and I'm gonna walk through few key points of that document. And then really the main purpose tonight is to look at some preliminary results from the buildable land inventory that we've been working on. But before that, we get into that portion. I want to talk about our project overview a bit here. And we can't see Walt up there, but we can see him. I can see him on the computer, and I know we can hear him. But Walt, wondering if you could just say a few words about, I believe Walt's the one who reached out to try to get these grant funds, and a little bit about kind of what led to you seeking these grant funds, Walt.
Okay, thank you. It's kind of interesting. About a year and a half ago, I had a developer from the metro area looking to build some houses in Yamhill, and he noticed that there was a sort of a dearth of available land. We looked at the option of potentially going to a UGB amendment, and that probably didn't work out well. Again, you are aware the state's going through some changes, and we won't be able to look at that until next year. But that got sharing the information with the Planning Commission, that got the commission thinking about what other changes can we make to our existing development language. For example, providing for infill housing, maybe smaller lots, other types of changes that will provide additional housing opportunities here in the community. Piggybacking on that, the Economic Development and Downtown Committee are very interested in, just put simply, sprucing up and improving the quality of the downtown. And with that, I applied for a couple of grants, one on housing and a technical assistant grant to go ahead and look at code amendments for the downtown. I want to thank DLCD for approving the grants, but also, frankly, awarding a nice chunk of money to do this. And I think it's really going to benefit the community. This is a golden opportunity for Yamhill to have a good snapshot of where they are now, but also figure out where they want to go in the future.
Great, thank you very much, Walt. So I'm just going to touch on, according to the grants themselves, what the objectives listed are before we get into more of the details. So there were two grants, one related to downtown or the central business district, and as Walt mentioned, and the other for housing. The first grant, so the central business district grant, wanted to look at a few things. One, aligning land use regulations and zoning for downtown with the community's vision for downtown. So we'll be talking about that. Second, just to make sure that the code is adhering to all the relevant state rules and statutes. The residential code update, the main purpose is to facilitate housing production, affordability, and choice. And this is part of really a statewide effort to do that. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And again, also wanting to update the code to make sure it's complying with the rules and statutes. And I should say, along with the code updates, we'll be looking at the city's comprehensive plan as well to make sure that everything aligns. So aligning with state regulations and then making sure that the comprehensive plan and the code are aligned as well. And then finally, we're conducting this buildable land inventory. For those who are not familiar, and this is trying to identify vacant and redevelopable lands for residential development in particular. And for those who aren't familiar, the state process, the state requires cities of a certain size to have a 20-year land supply for both jobs and housing. And the way you find out if you have that 20-year land supply is comparing your supply to your demand. So the typical process as part of what's called a housing capacity analysis is to forecast 20 years in terms of population, break that down into income type and housing type, and you can kind of extrapolate that to how many acres are needed. And then you compare that to your supply, which is the buildable land inventory, which is what we're conducting now. There's some state rule changes happening right now that are going to go into effect January 1st. So I believe when these grants were awarded, DLCD was kind of not encouraging cities to do that full analysis right now, wanting them to wait until the rule changes are finalized. But what we are able to do is do the supply side. So this is setting up the city when the time comes to do that population projection and the demand side work and identify or determine if the city has enough land to support future growth. A little bit more detail in terms of objectives for the two grants. For the Central Business District, eliminate any confusing or conflicting language. Make sure that there's what we call clear and objective guidelines for development within the Central Business District. Streamlining the review process and reducing subjectivity, so trying to make things as, again, clear and objective as possible. Providing a potential for housing opportunities in the Central Business District, and then enhancing the livability and walkability of that downtown core. Specific issues we might look at are the Central Business District boundaries, the types of uses that are allowed and encouraged in downtown, and then looking at potential requirements, things like parking and design, building design. And then for the residential update, we'll be looking at introducing new housing types to the code. This is in line with House Bill 3395, which looks at middle housing. So a lot of communities around the state, their codes are really set up to encourage single-family detached dwellings, but don't really allow, or apartments, but don't really allow what we call middle housing, which includes things like duplexes, triplexes, or quad, fourplexes, townhomes, and cottage clusters. So all of those are kind of smaller housing types that fit somewhere in between single-family detached homes and apartments. And again, the state is trying to promote housing affordability and choice. So basically, providing, allowing at least for more housing, different types of housing to be built that might fit different household needs and different income brackets. Again, we want to incorporate clear and objective standards as part of our code, residential code update, and again, like the Central Business District, streamline the process, the development review process for new housing. Any questions kind of this overarching view of what we're trying to accomplish with this project?
I did have a question on the, it says, as we approach the population size of 2,500, there's new housing thresholds that are required. What is our current population?
It's very close. I don't remember offhand. Journey, can you look that up while we're chatting here?
Yeah, I'll check into that.
Yeah, thanks. I can't remember. I looked recently, but I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's pretty close to 2,500, and I believe, Melissa can correct me if I'm wrong, that House Bill 3395, what that did was extend the middle housing provisions. The threshold used to be 10,000, and then I think that House Bill lowered it to 2,500, and that's what. So actually, the original middle housing bill had these two thresholds: what used to be 10,000, which is now 2,500, and the only the basic requirement there is anywhere that cities allow single-family detached homes, they need to allow duplexes as well on those same parcels. For large cities, which is the threshold of 25,000, they have to allow all those other housing types I just mentioned: duplex, fourplex, townhomes, and cottage clusters in any zoning district that allows single-family detached residential. But so the threshold for Yamhill is the lower, the duplex. But we might, as we move forward, we might look into some of those other housing types, depending on, that's why this committee is here, to help guide our work and think about what's the right fit for Yamhill. Journey?
So,
Yeah.
if I heard you correctly, it's currently for duplexes for a population of our size.
Correct.
It's not the other ones that you mentioned. That's for
That's not required.
25,000 and over.
Correct.
Okay.
It's not required, but it doesn't prevent the city from doing more than just the duplexes.
Okay.
Journey?
Yeah, and as of 2022 is about 1,150.
Huh.
And that was
Yeah, that's what it,
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It's
Okay, I thought the population was closer. I must.
Yeah. And is there any estimate of what it will be with the new homes going in over by the park? Like, do you guys have any
We certainly don't have-
flow
I would say,
analytics?
how many
or
homes are there?
57?
57 new.
So 50 times
2.5
Yeah,
even, I mean,
yeah.
A couple hundred,
Okay.
but still below the 2,500 mark, for sure at that point.
Thank you.
So, taking a step back, Yamhill probably won't be required for a while to enact any of these housing types, but that's what the grant is for, to kind of look at a lot permitting
Right,
more housing types.
but the good thing that is happening, at least in terms of now, is that we've had 2 separate housing developments happen that are being quickly absorbed, which shows demand, because previously there was no way to proof up demand because there was nothing to buy, right?
So one of the things I was hoping to do right now is just go around the room, and we can go in order or not, but having heard kind of the broad outlines of this project, I'd love to hear from folks, just maybe 1 or 2 things, what you would like to see out of this process, either for downtown or the, Main Street, or for housing. You can do one or both, but I'd love to hear just some, start to think about like what our vision is for downtown and what you're seeing about housing. A lot of this is about housing affordability, and we all know that housing prices have been increasing for quite some time. So what are some of the goals that you would like to see come out of this project? And Jenny, I know you've been thinking about some of this for a while, so if we could start with you, that would be great.
Sure, yeah, well, what first comes to mind, because we also own some property in town, some residential property that we have our daughter rents from us, but thinking about the other types of things with that, with the House Bill 3395, and then these other types of dwellings, besides the duplex, I'd be very interested to think about what we could do to have like attractive, creative, other ways to provide housing for people, like the cottage cluster idea to me sounds very interesting, and I'd like to know more about that and see what just some other options are.
And we definitely at future meetings will come back with a more visual, looking at some of these different housing types and what they can look like.
And so then as far as the commercial district, I think to make sure that places that are zoned commercial, that they're being utilized as commercial entities, making the most of that, properties that are, we have a lot of properties that are, sitting vacant and that seem to be just falling into disrepair. So I think it would be wonderful to be able to try to encourage thoughtful, investment in the town and have it be worth, people who want to, start a business and do something, like have it actually be a good place to spend money.
Great, thank you. People can volunteer, or we can go to Ben if you're willing to jump in.
Sure. Yeah, just from kind of what I heard, I'm just kind of looking to see what we can do to best utilize the land that's already within the UGB, and make this, like I said, use to its best use before we look at expansion.
Great. Pat?
Well, we're a water challenged community, and so a lot of this discussion is going to be shaped with the potential for, restoring our water supply to the community and to allow for future expansion. So that's certainly one thing that would be nice to maybe work with the Water Committee to come up with some ideas in that regard. I think the downtown core in Yamhill has lagged behind surrounding communities in terms of just appearance and the viability and the vibrancy of businesses that you see, working out in town. We're in a heavy wine area, and there's really no tasting rooms in town. I always wondered about that. I understand, I may be wrong on this, but there's a prohibition against manufacturing in town, and that would include something like a winery operating in town. And it would be nice at some point to address that. And then I'm very interested in the buildable land inventory as well here.
Great. We'll talk a lot about that shortly.
Yeah. Love to see, obviously, the code being updated. This has been a long-standing desire of mine. Also, I'd like to see the CBD expanded at least up and down 47, so have it go a little bit farther beyond its boundaries. And then laterally from 47, especially on the west side over here, see a less intensive commercial zone that allows both residential and commercial uses to coexist side by side.
Great.
Some of my concerns would be, as Pat said, our water capacity source for about 3 months of the year, being able to fulfill the needs. And same with our wastewater, if our lagoons can handle all this extra growth. And bringing in another water source, if they bring it in from the Willamette, our water quality will drop from what our source is now. Those are just my concerns, but it would be nice to see downtown grow and prosper.
Great.
Yeah, I think similarly, certainly interested in the viability of downtown. I don't know that anybody really likes to read code, but I was interested in the fact that we would be reviewing and updating that. When I look at communities that I think have strong code, or at least they appear to, I think of like St. Paul. When you drive through their community, it seems like they have a lot of pride in their community, both from a business standpoint and residential. From a residential standpoint, I have huge concerns with our infrastructure. Water has been mentioned. I think our emergency services also would need to be addressed. Our schools, I don't know that we necessarily need to focus right now on the residential part of expanding or building until we can figure out some of the infrastructure that we have challenges with. But from a business standpoint, I think there's quite a ways we could go.
I don't really have a lot, just, we'd love to see some other like, retail, like, I don't know, I like the cutesy stuff, like the soap stores and that kind of stuff, or like a cafe.
Yeah, so with the housing, water also is a big concern of mine. But to have affordable housing in Yamhill is a wonderful thing. As I have kids that are growing up, I would love to see them be able to stick around.
Yeah.
I don't know that they would let me purchase my property today. If I were to walk into the bank, I think they would ask to leave. So that's something definitely that I'd like to see. Central Business District overlay, yeah, I agree with Mr. Higgins on expanding, certainly to the west, maybe. And then maybe pushing past Isaiah to the north would be a good thing. And then there's some work being done on making that district a historic district so that we can sort of focus potentially on keeping, you know, Western type look that Yamhill just naturally has intact, as opposed to bringing it up to the glass and brick of some of the neighboring towns.
Great.
One of the things I also want to mention that Jujetta said was that community resilience portion of it. So in terms of, you know, emergency services, city hall, meeting spaces, things like that, I think that's desperately critical. And fortunately, community resilience and infrastructure are two of the things that the governor is very interested in funding. So I will definitely point that out.
Sounds good. Shelley, did you have anything you wanted to?
I'm making a note so I can pull up on grant sources from.
Yeah, Melissa's listening, so.
I would just echo probably a lot of the same stuff. I mean, the thing I would really love to see is the beautification of downtown, some additional retail options, just more choices for people to spend money here. A sandwich shop, cafe, like you said, coffee shop, ice cream store, pet store, just some more retail options. And then also I would really like to be able to see us enforce the code as it exists once it's updated, so that buildings are being used as they are intended, and then we can determine what we actually have available after that.
Melissa, did you have anything you wanted to contribute?
No, I think those are all very valid points and definitely something that's at the top of our mind at the department and like was mentioned in the governor's mind as well and her priorities. I think this is a great start to the discussion as the city undertakes an update and gets the valued community input to support that.
Great. And Walt, having heard everyone, do you have anything else you want to add?
No, actually, it just surprises me. I've been working with small towns basically for about the last 25 years, and the same issues are still there. A place, affordable housing so the kids can move back to town. And it's amazing that really hasn't changed. But I think I see this in most small communities, and I think everyone's identified key areas for small, excuse me, working on a cold here, key areas for small communities to work on.
Well, thanks everyone. That gives us some benchmarks to look at as we do our work. And I'm just going to take a minute. It might be a little bit repetitive here, but just so you understand the process and kind of the key elements of our work. The buildable land inventory I mentioned, we're going to be looking at that this evening. And then Doug, who is currently hunting in northern Idaho, but he's the person who's really working on the code. And the first thing we're doing is looking, it says code audit and code and then comprehensive. So Doug's been looking at both the residential code and the downtown code and doing what we call an audit. With the guidelines of the grant, he's been reviewing to see if the code as written is achieving those goals and what can be done, what types of updates could be made to better achieve those objectives. Those are the concepts that we talk about. And to your point earlier, Jetta, when we're done with the code audit and concepts and then we're doing a similar thing for the comprehensive plan, this is the easiest and best time, not just for you, but for the broader community to participate, because we haven't yet gotten into the minutia of the language itself. We're talking, here's the types of things we're trying to achieve, and here's some of the proposals of how to achieve it. Not getting in, like I said, into the detail of the language, the code language, but really the concepts and the ideas. And so at our next meeting, that's going to be our focus. And then following that, I'll talk about public involvement in a minute, but following that meeting is we are scoped for one broader community meeting or outreach to the community. And so that's the right time for us to reach out to the community, again, before we get into the details of the code language. But after we get feedback from all of you and the broader community on the concepts, then we will start updating the code and the comprehensive plan. We'll come back to you with drafts of the language, but really, we'll give you all of the language, but at our meetings, we'll present things in chunks and make it a little easier to digest. We'll get feedback from you, and then we'll prepare the final code. So that's the basic outline of our scope of work. And we are, part of our scope is to take that all the way through adoption with Planning Commission and City Council. Any questions about the scope? We're scheduled to finish by about around May of 2025. We've been working on the audits and the buildable land inventory. Here we are at the beginning of fall at CAC meeting number 1. We anticipate meeting again pretty soon here, probably the second half of October, and then doing some of our public outreach, that big public workshop before Thanksgiving, so that then during the holidays, we can go back and start drafting the code. We'll have our third meeting, as you can see, probably in early 2025, January, February timeline. Get feedback from you, finalize the code, and then towards that March, April, May time period, have our Planning Commission and City Council meetings. I mentioned public engagement. So there's just a few components of public engagement for this project, and this is all laid out in the public engagement plan that we gave you. Citizen Advisory Committee, that's all of you, that's one key component. There is one large public meeting, as I mentioned, that we're going to have hopefully in the first half of November. There's also budget for our consulting firm to support the city in doing one city-led outreach activity. So that could be, and I'm not super familiar, I apologize, with the different events that happen in Yamhill, but it could be, you know, having a booth at an event. It could be doing some sort of mailing to encourage people to participate. We're gonna brainstorm this in a minute, but so the one city-led event that we'll support with materials and everything that's needed there. And then those planning commission and city council meetings towards the end of the project. Journey put together in that public engagement plan just a quick scan of possible stakeholders. I realize this is a little hard to read on the screen, and it's not too critical that you see all of, well, I will be asking you to identify other stakeholders, but we just kind of thought, you know, what are some of the stakeholders that we want to make sure that they know about this project? And for instance, we're inviting them to that public workshop, that public meeting in November. So our agency partners, certain industries, industry and business that's represented here at this table quite a bit. Our fire district and police department, the schools. We want to make sure we're including seniors and potentially youth in these conversations. So that was just a quick scan that Journey put together. So I'm going to go back to this slide and just wondering if people have any ideas for this city-led activity to try to get people engaged and involved. What might be, in your mind, a good opportunity for the city to reach a lot of people and either you know, ask them questions or engage them, or to create, raise awareness of the project so that people know about it and can participate. Are there any obvious opportunities?
What's the timeline of this? Is this the November one?
This would probably be, yeah,
The pre-Thanksgiving?
November. We could go into December and even January, depending on what the opportunity is.
The holiday, Christmas stuff coming up, but I don't know how much they're gonna be focused on that. And you could create awareness, but I don't know about
Yeah,
engagement.
and if there could be, if this could happen at different events, you know, to try to get people in different, you know.
It can be multiple events. I mean, really, we're just, it's up to, you know, Shelley and all of you would need to be the ones kind of doing the actual, you know, staffing of whatever. We can provide all the materials. So you can do as much as you all want.
I mean, besides just actually having an event, and the only thing between now and the end of the year is the Christmas tree lighting.
And then
And,
trunk or treat.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
So,
so
I
we do
mean,
have two.
I guess we could hand out flyers at trunk or treat.
Mhm.
To promote
Just
the
to make-
public meeting
Yeah,
and
exactly.
to give a little information about the project.
Yeah, because we have that all, I guess I need to run that by city council first, but the plan is in the empty lot there like we did last year. So 2 events, so the Halloween set up there and then with the Christmas tree lighting, which will also pull in people like with the fire department. So I think that that tends to get more like people with families and kids, but I don't know anything about like sporting events, things like that.
Another thing I forgot, Shelley, I don't think we talked about this in detail, but does the city have the ability to create a web page for this project as part of the city website? So I can get you all the information to populate that page, and that way we can also include a web address or a QR code on those flyers so that people can go get more information on the city's website.
So is the concept that like trunk or treat, Christmas tree lighting would potentially be the awareness, and then there's actually a public meeting where they come together and share thoughts at some point?
I mean, I think that's a good idea. We also could provide, I can't remember if we're scoped to or not, but it's not too huge of a lift. We could provide an online opportunity for people to comment too, if that's something we're interested in.
What are we asking them to provide feedback on specifically?
We're gonna have those code concepts ready. So we'll be saying, okay, here are what we're proposing to change about downtown or change about housing, or what type of housing is allowed in Yamhill, and we'd like to get your feedback. And we'll even be, you know, at times there's options. Would you like to do option A, or would you like to do option B?
So it seems to me, and you guys all feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm limited in my time here, but in my time here, it feels like this is a community that likes to come in person and participate and provide feedback at things like this versus, I mean, online's certainly an option, but it feels like there's creating the opportunity for people to physically come and share.
Yeah,
Seems like a popular thing.
Yeah, I think you would want to give people constructive notice at an event, flyer, you know, maybe see if the school district can send a link out to however they communicate with the students, send it out in the water bill, and then invite somebody to come, you know, I don't know, January week 1 or whatever it is to a meeting here. Because I definitely think people they want to filter in. Well, and then there's a lot of older folks who I think would prefer to come and say something in person instead of.
A lot that people don't, there's a community that, a good chunk of the people that don't use a lot of web.
Well, and we have this, you know, we are scoped to do a public meeting, so creating awareness for that at the end of October, I think is a great idea.
I think the website's a good idea for people to get like the QR code, you know, the flyer, they can go there to get information ahead of time.
I can do that, no problem.
Well, it also feels more community oriented if we actually like have people gather, right? As opposed to, I mean, having them respond to a you know, web survey is very
Which people
not
get
Yamhill.
a million of anyway, right?
Yeah. More of a town hall thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Is the idea to at least give people the opportunity, inform them several different ways, give them the opportunity to provide input, have the meeting to provide input, and then you snooze, you lose, like if you.
I don't know if I'd quite put it that way, but yes, I mean, that's the idea. We want the broader community. I mean, this group is here to help guide our work and do your best to represent the community, but we want to at least give an opportunity for others to participate. And, you know, there'll be other opportunities when we get to the adoption phase, coming to planning commission or coming to city council. If someone didn't know and is concerned about something, they'll still have that opportunity, but this is an early opportunity to help shape our work.
Similar to what the meeting that Doug Rex did earlier last year.
Sure.
That was very well attended.
Oh, good.
What about farther outside residents? How far out? Because if we're expanding the urban growth boundary, do we want to invite more outer rims of people or?
Water district people?
No, just, I mean, just in general, like.
Well, my thought would be that these types of things that we're talking about here don't affect just the folks that live within the city limits.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking.
So, you know, when you're 3 miles, 5 miles, 7 miles outside of Yamhill, this is still your town.
Still my, yeah.
And you're gonna wanna show up, and I think absolutely those folks should be involved as much as possible.
8 miles out of town, but it's still my town.
But yeah, you shop at the T&E every day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I mean, like, you care
So
what
where
it
would be
looks
the
like
best
in the
way
street.
for you to receive information, your water bill?
I don't get Yamhill water.
Yeah, you're in a well.
Would like the rural water
On the
districts.
well.
So definitely in the water bill, rural water districts, the same normal postings that we did. We actually at the water advisory board yesterday, we talked about, you know, that how wonderful it can be when, if you have an elderly neighbor that may not be, you know, internet savvy, to let them know when things are occurring. There's also a community member that's putting together a phone list of folks that might like just the old school telephone call of these things are about to happen. And I think that person would probably be very grateful to be involved in some of this kind of outreach.
Well, we have a couple community pages on Facebook too that are, you know, people pay attention to, which actually have those sort of thematic. It's what I love about the Yamhill community pages is actually about like Yamhill community, right?
Right, it's true to its word.
Lost dog, lost chicken, lost whatever. And then if the school district could maybe see its way clear to sending out some sort of information, somehow just directing them to the city's website, that'd probably be good too. Because then you hit the people with kids.
Great. These are all great ideas, and I agree, you know, we don't need to stop at the city borders.
But don't you, if you're code enforcing, because honestly, it affects the tax base of the city of Yamhill. And me, being an outside resident, really, I don't have any say-so of what happens within the city of Yamhill. So if you're talking about something that is going to directly impact the marketable value of their home or the real estate asset that they own, then really those should be the ones making the decision about what sort of code changes they're going to have. Because I can want whatever I want in the outside community, but quite frankly, I don't have a seat at the table, which is also why I almost wonder why I'm here, because I'm not a city person. Yes, it's my town. It's the one that I'm next to, but until the city expands its UGB, then except for the pieces of ground we have in the UGB, we really, like I said, I don't know if I really do have a say so.
I got two comments for you. So one, you do because actually, well, I mean, your dad and your uncle do because they actually own land with in UGB. So there's that, and they sent you to be the representative. So you've been knighted. The other thing is too, is on a lot of public testimony, the city takes your name and your address. And so they'll actually, so I've been to public meetings in McMinnville and Newburgh where they'll say, are you in the city limits? Yes, no. And so people are free to provide testimony even though they're not actually living in the city limits. And council and planning commission weigh those based on, who's in town and who's not. But a lot of times, Yamhill's a small place and there should be, there's a lot of people who actually come here and use the services. And I kind of think it'd be nice to have their voices heard.
Absolutely, we do at the city council, everybody's welcome to come and everybody's welcome to speak. Just because in November you're able to vote outside the city limits doesn't mean you don't have a stake in the town. So yeah, I'd encourage you to come to those meetings if you wanted to, or have others participate in this.
Yeah, I'm not saying that. My point is that I think these code amendments are going to more directly affect somebody who owns property within the UGB. Yeah. And I think that should be weighted. If I owned more property in town, I would really worry about that. Letting outside influences come in and decide what the code's going to be that's going to affect me, that they don't have a stake in the game. And that would be my concern.
Yeah. This comes up in projects all the time, especially when we're doing something like an online survey and people say, we don't want exactly that, or someone to kind of tip the scales, so to speak. But I think my opinion kind of echoes the others that, ultimately it's city council that's making the decision, and you and other folks have a stake in the community. People, I think it's beneficial to hear from people who visit Yamhill, who aren't from the, just to hear different perspectives. And then ultimately, we, through your guidance, will be drafting things that ultimately Planning Commission and City Council have to sign off on. And they of course, have the best interest of the city. So I think it's a valid topic to bring up. But I typically think that the more participation, the better, in most cases. One other question for you all is just if there's any key groups that come to mind that you think we really need to make sure we're involving. We'll reach out through all the tools. I think we heard some great tools earlier, or mechanisms for reaching people, but are there any specific groups that you think, for the downtown, we need to be talking to these people? I mean, like the property owners obviously will be a very key stakeholder, or for housing, you really need to be talking to these people.
Not that big a place.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. It's just I just want to make sure we're not missing anyone, I think is the key.
I think the identified group of developers, but I would like to see that list expanded.
Yeah.
I feel like there's more that have I would like to see somebody that lives here and does this for a living versus someone that just comes here to make money.
Yeah.
Speaking on behalf of this group.
You just had 2 developers develop in the city of Yamhill, and I don't think either one of them are listed here.
Yeah, this was just a quick scan, so if you can get me those names, we'd be happy to add them to the list.
Yeah. One of them was invited. I don't know if we're talking about the same people, but let's connect after and make sure about those names.
Okay, we'll just work to make sure that we have a comprehensive list. Okay, the buildable land inventory. Hopefully, we'll all be able to see. I was kind of looking to see if I was able to roll this screen up a bit, but there's some infrastructure over here. So if we need to get up and come look at the screen, we can do that, but let's see how it goes here. So here's how we do a buildable land inventory. We take our full land supply for the entire city. Well, in this case, we're looking specifically at the zones that allow housing, because this is for residential purposes. Then we take out the acreages that are constrained by things like floodplains or steep slopes, which steep slopes are 25% or greater in this process, or locally significant wetlands. Areas that can't be built on, we take those out. Then we also take out other kind of unsuitable lands, things like the public right-of-way, public parks, historic sites, other places that can't be built on, as well as properties that are developed and we don't think are going to be redeveloped. And that leaves us, or not serviceable properties. Sometimes there's properties where providing infrastructure is just not feasible. And what that leaves us with is our buildable land. So here's just a quick slide on the settlement pattern. You probably are all familiar with this kind of view of the city, but population, oh, there's the population. 2020 census says 1,150. And we got information from the city and from DLCD and looked at the online zoning maps. You know, a lot of Yamhill's kind of, some of the data that we received was a little bit out of date. So we worked with Walt and we kind of figured out what we think the right boundaries are of the city and the UTB. So here's kind of what we had originally, but here's what we understand the boundaries are now. Let me see if I can do this. That. So hopefully that looks familiar to everyone. Here's the city zoning. You know, commercial, general commercial along the highway, residential, limited commercial as well across the street, 2-family residential zone, and then we have a couple single-family residential zone. I don't know why. Let me see if I can move this as well. So we have a R1 and R2 single-family residential zones. And there's just a snapshot of the official zoning map. This is the map that we created. Okay, here's county zoning outside of the city. There are a couple areas within Yamhill's urban growth boundary that don't have haven't had city zoning applied yet. There are one property that has an urban designation and 2 that have exclusive, I think EF80 is exclusive farm use 80 acres. So here are those properties. And Walt, if anything looks out of whack, let us know. There's this property right here is one of the EF80 to the east. This kind of skinny property here, and then this one right here designated as urban. So they have county zone designations right now. Here's a snapshot from the comprehensive plan map, and there's
1999.
Yeah, so it's timely, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We just used the comprehensive plan map for some guidance here, because again, 1999. But this parcel that's EF80 was called future residential in the comprehensive plan, so that's just one example. For the BLI, we use kind of usually primarily zoning, but a combination of zoning and comprehensive plan designations. And again, we worked with Walt to identify all these designations here. These are the comprehensive plan designations, I think. Oh, no, those are the zones for the most part. And again, here's those those other, those 3 parcels that were a little bit different than the rest. Okay, in terms of the zones, all the zones that the city has, except for the light industrial zone, allow for some level of residential. Before we finalize the BLI, we're gonna have to look, we need to look at a few things, make sure the urban growth boundary and the city limits are correct. Take a look at some of these overlay zones and you know what their impact is on development. I can't remember, I think there's one parcel kind of up here that would be vacant, maybe it's that one. Or there's a parcel somewhere that our mapping, our cartographer pointed out that is definitely impacted by that flood hazard overlay zone.
I was gonna say, the one that was on the lower left that looked like it was either the park or next to the park.
Okay.
That's where the flood zone is.
Okay, perfect. There is a multifamily zone in the code that I don't know that it's been designated anywhere in the city. And then the code misses the light industrial category. So there's some things we need to clean up. So here's existing land uses. Single family, as I mentioned, single family detached homes make up, or let me start over. If we have a single family detached zone parcel, and it's more than 1/2 acre, for our buildable lands inventory process, the state assumes that that parcel can be divided and another parcel can be built. So anything over 1/2 acre. Larger sites and residential zones that are owned by churches might be an opportunity for residential development. But open space, public land, educational sites, roads, utilities, those are all considered unbuildable. So kind of your public infrastructure. And is this the area that you were talking about where the homes are being built?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's where.
Okay. Then we got that right. And they have, but they're not done building yet?
I believe 6 houses are online, well, 6 houses are hooked to city utilities at this point,
Okay,
but many more have been completed.
okay.
Yeah, streets are in, all the horizontal infrastructure, everything's ready to go.
Great. Here's a map of constraints. I mentioned some of those before. Open water, floodplain, and wetlands are the ones that we see. There's very little slopes of greater than 25% right there. The comprehensive plan mentions a local wetland inventory, riparian corridors, and historic sites, but we don't have GIS data for that, so we're gonna have to work with Walt and with you all to identify where those exist. I should mention, we'll be sending this presentation to all of you because we're gonna want you to go home and be able to look at a map that's zoomed, and zoom in on it to get a better perspective. So we don't need to solve all of our problems tonight. I'm just giving the overview. We also use data from Dogami, which I'm not going to remember the full, but that's the Department of Geology,
Minerals and something
Minerals. I'm sure Melissa probably knows, but FEMA and the Oregon Wetland Database. So we do have other sources to help inform. But so basically, as I mentioned earlier, any properties that are, especially within the floodplain or open water, those will be removed from the inventory. So here's what we have for vacant land. So any lot of at least 3,000 square feet and with an improvement value below 10,000, that's what we are considering to be vacant. Because some cities' GIS data includes a field or a column that's like, is it vacant or is it developed? But when we don't have that information, these are the parameters that we use. Our GIS manager did add 3 lots that were just under 3,000 square feet because, and I'm not going to show exactly where they are, but they were either two, I think 2 of them were adjacent to each other. So if they were assembled, they could exceed that 3,000 square foot threshold. And the other one was adjacent to another vacant property that was more than 3,000 square feet. As we mentioned earlier, public lands and industrial zone lots are removed from consideration, so none of those should be showing up on this vacant lands map. She also removed the area that's under construction. And she used aerial photographs and Google's Street View to help guide our analysis. So, really what we're seeing is these larger parcels here in the southern part of the city, although we need to recognize that they are constrained by the floodplain or other constraints, so that might limit their development capacity. What's this parcel up here?
Terry Weifels owns that. It's actually, I think it's hazelnuts right now, or it was lawn seed for a while.
Yeah, it's like,
It's an open field.
it's open field,
Yeah.
and then the hazelnuts are beyond that.
Okay, so that's a legit vacant
That's a
parcel that
legit,
could,
yeah, the one that's on the lower left that's in the yellow, I think that's, Jane Heinrich's park.
I think it is too.
That's actually,
Looks like
that's
a
actually city-owned
City
park.
road, right
Okay.
there.
So it should be green.
well, it should be taken out of the inventory if it's a city-owned park.
And it also gets a little wet there.
Yeah, it's also in the floodplain, very much in the floodplain.
Jeremy, that's the kind of vertical parcel in the southwest part, that one that's in the floodplain?
Perfect. I documented that.
Great, thanks. I don't know if you can see me pointing, so, and then what's this parcel right
That's
here?
also city property, isn't it?
Well, it's definitely wetlands.
No,
I
yeah,
don't
it's,
know if
it's, that's a wetland parcel, but I think it's actually whoever owns Ben,
It's owned.
that's your guys's, isn't it, to the south? Yeah.
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 It drains into the nice pond you built.
Not really, but
Oh, okay.
A little lower than that.
Yeah, but that's a real, I mean, that's not
Well,
buildable.
and I'm no developer, but from
It's still soft.
from a legal standpoint, if you're in the floodway, you can't develop there, but things in the floodplain and things, and, wetlands, those areas still can potentially be developed. There's things like mitigation and things like that, but, so we might just show them as vacant but constrained rather than taking them out of the inventory.
Yeah, that envelope, the building envelope there that wouldn't be within the wetland area would be,
Yeah,
it's tiny, and then obviously hard to mitigate
sure.
off-site to someplace else.
We also look at partially vacant land. Again, I mentioned earlier, any parcel that's greater than a half acre, you assume, at least in this initial, you gotta remember this is kind of a paper exercise until people like you all help us understand what's on the ground. So any parcel of a half acre or greater, we assume that the home takes up a quarter acre, and the rest could, in theory, be divided and built upon. A lot of people say, oh, so-and-so owns that property and they're never gonna develop. At this point, the state, that's not a consideration for us. We assume that within a 20-year time period, the ownership may change, but that it could be developed. So that's how we look at single-family lots. And then, let's see here.
so you're back to your strip on the left-hand side, that is owned. It's public, or private. So the park is outlined correctly.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it's showing it as
That's really.
not vacant, but we need to take that, on the previous map, we need to take it out if it's a park.
No, it's not a park. The
So
park
what
is
you're
actually
saying is-
mapped correctly.
Yeah, just to the left of the green space there, which would indicate the park, that is owned land, I believe, by the Van Dyke.
That right there.
Oh, that's the
That
city.
right-
It's the one to
That right
the,
there is our driveway to the lagoons.
yeah, the green square that's on there, just immediately to the left of that. No, other green square, that one. So just immediately to the west of that, that's the Van Dyke parcel.
That is ours, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But keep going far left, and that is Dumb Dice. So I think somebody was saying that was Heinrich
Well,
Park. but-
Oh, yeah, because
To the left
actually,
of that line is Dumb Dice, but right where that purple line is, that's where the driveway going to the lagoons is.
yeah, it is interesting. 'Cause-
That's basically the fence line right there.
I'm gonna go back here real quick,
There you
so,
go.
Yeah,
just so Jeremy can see as well. So we're saying this is not park,
Correct, that's private.
yeah,
but
that's,
this is park,
West of that is,
this is park.
No,
west of that orange is Dumb Dice.
well, so actually some of Dumb Dice is in,
But our
In the
our
city
driveway
limits
is
of-
right
You guys
down that
can
line.
get up and point to them.
It
Yeah.
might be helpful.
I'll
try to mimic it on the
I'll show you
screen.
since I drive it every day.
there you go.
West Side Road.
So here's Public Works, our driveway is right here to our lagoon system.
So this is owned by the
This is
city?
This is
Kyle, you're actually, you're off. So the square, go right.
Oh, you're just outside.
It's not. Here.
Right where our head office is, right here. And this is our driveway.
So you're on the border, but what about, what's on this property right here?
That's our drive right now.
That's our road to the lagoons.
Doesn't say OC.
Hang in there, Journey.
Oh,
We're getting stuff figured out.
getting teeny tiny.
So you slide over, but that's in the right spot. That would go right here.
That's
You're close.
close.
Yeah, so Steve
But it's
Demdike
not-
has a
it's not
weird
zoned.
little chunk
That's not
on
zoned
the
right then.
other side of the park that's actually in the
This
city
goes
then
Further over than that.
Well, I'm gonna leave that parcel in until someone marks up a map and tells us.
I'll send, I have it all, we'll send it to you.
Okay. So ignore that earlier request, Journey, to take that parcel out. So here's our partially vacant lands. I also mentioned there's 2 church lots that have at least a quarter of undeveloped land attached to them that could be potentially used for housing. So we'll send you this map as well. So in the end, we have this is a map of kind of what's developed, what's park, and then what's vacant and partially vacant. And we have some constraints mapped, hashed over there as well. So these are the maps that, I might send the PowerPoint and then send a separate PDF map that you can really zoom in. It won't have, we'll use aerial photographs. We'll kind of put the lines over the aerial photographs so you can really zoom in and get yourself oriented. I know it's a little hard sometimes when you're just seeing these boxes and not the actual land.
So what is the green designation marked other?
It's pretty much publicly owned land, so mostly parks. It could potentially be any public works or infrastructure as well. So land that is not being included in our inventory. The only land that will be included in the inventory are the orange and the purple. And even the purple, we know that there's something there, but there's excess land that could be developed.
I was just saying, I think that big green one is the schools, right?
Right, schools, publicly owned.
What do you do? Your partially developed land, one of them's near the church, you said?
2 of them, I think.
Yeah, doesn't the church have parking requirements for its building size in our code?
We'll have to look into that, yeah.
Okay.
That's kind of a next step in the analysis, is like what really is the potential. Any other questions so far?
So I'm just curious, in comparison to other cities our size, I mean, like, this doesn't look to me like a lot of developable land.
Well, I mean, I think in general, I agree with you. Here's our vacant land, and it sounds like we have it, there's at least one
Just Weifels.
viable, and sizable parcel that could potentially be developed at some point. The rest of it is pretty, much smaller and scattered. So there's not as much potential there.
I think that the one parcel that's Weifels that's probably only a couple acres.
Well, I'm just wondering if that means then our plan moves to, redevelopment as far as buildings and stuff to achieve goals that the community wants to see.
Potentially, let's talk about that. I'm gonna go to this last
Can I ask
couple minutes.
one question?
Sure.
for that? So how much, so if this is 20 years out, then, and forgive me if you already mentioned that, like, how are you determining what 20 years out, what the need will be?
So these are some of the rules that are changing, but as of today, before January 1st, when things change a little bit, the way it's been for the last number of years is the Portland State University Population Research Center does population forecasts. And then we as the consultants take those and we kind of put them into categories we do a lot of different research, but part of it is putting them into categories by income, which is kind of an indicator of what type of housing people might be able to afford. And then each type of housing, we also look at zoning and what densities are allowed in these different zones. And then you just extrapolate out and eventually you get acreages, each, single family home on average, this much acreage. So we just kind of start with that population number and extrapolate out to the acres needed to accommodate over 20 years. Does that make sense?
No, but,
It's all based on the population
okay.
forecast and how many people are expected to come here. And
Okay.
we come up with a number of acres that are needed to build the housing that they're gonna, I mean,
Based on what they can afford.
And they
in
also
part, yes.
take into consideration people leaving the state, because there were over 10,000.
The forecasts certainly,
Unenrolled in Oregon schools because they left the state.
yeah. So we take that overall forecast for land need, and then we subtract the acreages that we come up with here. And then what we're left with is either, oh, we have a surplus, we have more land than we need to accommodate 20 years of growth, or we don't have enough land to accommodate 20 years of growth. And then if that's the case, then there's kind of two next steps. One is first, a city has to look inside its current urban growth boundary to see if there are what we call efficiency measures that can be taken to address the need, such as increasing densities, raising building heights, rezoning something, if you have a surplus of industrial land, rezoning some of that to be residential, different activities like that. And then if those measures, whatever, aren't enough to make up that need, then you look to expanding the urban growth boundary. So hopefully that makes sense. We have two tables here. This shows the number of developed acres, those other acres that I mentioned, mostly I think publicly owned, vacant acres. That's kind of the land base. And then here it's broken down a little bit more. So buildable vacant land, the city has about 13 acres. That's not a lot. Buildable partially vacant, 22 acres. So the total, 35 acres of buildable land. That is not a lot of buildable land, to your point, Shelley. My guess would be that, when you get to the point where you do the forecasting, the need over 20 years is probably gonna exceed 35 acres, but I don't know that for sure. But there's also 10 acres of vacant land, like we saw, that's constrained by environmental constraints. So this is really the kind of what it's telling us, about 35 acres of buildable land that the city has right now. And again, this is just the supply side of things that we're doing for this project. We'll send you this PowerPoint presentation and then also a PDF of a map of the vacant and partially vacant designations over an aerial photograph, so you can kind of zoom in and you guys can mark them up and give them to Shelley or email them to me, and then that'll help us refine. And the next time we meet with you, I'll kind of show some of the changes that we made based on your input.
Can you go back to a couple of those maps that show, there's a parcel that is bounded by Olive Street and Pike and the stream that's on the northwest side of town here. And I'm curious if that's in the UGB or not.
Am I close?
That chunk that's etched out by the purple.
You're talking about the green chunk at the very top on the left, yeah?
Yeah, it's like.
It's like LDS Church.
Side of
I
it.
think that's what
The
that
LDS,
is.
it's the LDS Church.
No, northwest,
Up here,
up here.
that's where the church is.
Yeah,
So
so that's like the stop sign there before you turn left to go on Pike. So if you went straight, you'd go up Adcock by the.
So my guess is
To
that
my
this
house.
purple parcel is probably where the actual church structure is, that we've identified as maybe there's opportunity for some additional development. Sorry, this keeps going away. And I'll have to take a closer look at what, if this is the parking lot or.
Parking lot.
That's
The
the parking.
church, it kind of, I think, I go by it every single day, so it's kind of scooched over further towards where that green is, but it takes up that whole kind of curved angle,
What
and
makes
there's
churches
parking
a
around.
possibility for, I'm just curious what makes churches an option for developing the land? Do they just generally have big parcels they don't use fully, is that, or?
Yeah, well, that's often the case. Lots of times churches have as part of their mission, have an interest in providing housing, just as a community, contributing to the community. But also there are specific, and I'm not an expert on this, but there are also specific laws around and tax, benefits and things like that, that churches have access to that other, that private citizens do not.
I think my question was answered. I believe this is the parcel that I'm talking about.
Oh,
It's outside the.
that's outside the urban growth boundary, yeah. Okay. Walt, just wondering if you have any observations based on the conversation that you want to share?
Actually, I do appreciate you're going to forward us this information. I'd like to look at it, excuse me, a little bit closer. I was surprised how little land really is available, though, as a general comment.
Great, thanks, Walt. Melissa, anything, if you're still there, I can't see right now, but if I misspoke about anything or any other context that you want to add?
No, you were right on point. I'm still here. I am gonna have to take off at 7:20 though, unfortunately, but this is going really well and I don't have anything to correct or change.
Thank you, Melissa. Well, and actually, we're just about at the end. I'm happy to answer any additional questions or take any additional comments, but I think really between this meeting and the next one, what you can really do to help us is when we send you this information, kind of dig in and like I said, you can either send Shelley an email with just some comments, or you can actually mark up a map and get that to us one way or the other, take a picture of it or bring it in. And that'll really help us refine the map and make sure we're being as accurate as we can be.
Yeah, I'm happy to collect all the information and send it to you so it's all in one spot.
Great. In terms of next steps, I mentioned this a little bit. So we're working on the draft code audit and concepts and the comprehensive plan audit and looking at the policies. That's going to be the main purpose of our meeting next time. Doug will be here with me, and we'll walk through everything we found from our audits. And then again, we hope to have a public meeting in November, and it sounds like we'll help you by preparing. Well, I'll get you, Shelley, some content for a web page, but also we'll start preparing some sort of maybe a half page, like a postcard, big postcard size or something that can be handed out at that event, the Halloween type event, and anything else.
Okay. Do we have a date on that? I guess it's on 31st stuff. So,
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
We can also put, you could put something like that in the post office or here at City Hall or any other public places that you think people might frequent.
So I do have a question regarding the code audit and updates. I guess what's the objective if we're not gonna hold people accountable to them? I don't know that we're holding people accountable to the codes that we currently have.
That was one of the things that, at least from the YDA standpoint, we did originally brought up, is the fact that, the code's outdated, right? So what standard are you trying to hold people to? And once you update the code, you actually update the enforcement mechanisms on there. Now, the problem with enforcement is you only have so much of a stick to go after people for. So if you have a derelict house that's sitting on the corner of First and Main or whatever it is, there's not much you can do except, let fines accrue. And, you can put them on the water bill, but you can't foreclose on somebody or, compel them to pay it or change their ways. A lot of it's, you goad them, but it's really tough to, unless it's a serious life, health, safety issue, it's really tough to get enforcement escalated.
We need someone who's a black belt to take care of that.
Yeah,
I will say that the code and the comprehensive plan audits, especially the code audit, is going to be pretty comprehensive, and in some cases, a lot, for those familiar with code, a lot of things are interrelated. And when we come back with our report that we send out to you before the next meeting, you'll see we'll be focusing on the items that the grant is asking us to do, but we'll also be kind of leaving you with a list of, and here's some other things that we might want to follow up with, maybe another grant from DLCD in the future, some other things that we would recommend be cleaned up. But obviously, just for budgetary reasons, we'll need to focus our energy. We want to achieve those objectives that are laid out in the grant, but we also want to leave you with here's some other things that you're gonna wanna take a look at some time in the future. I know that doesn't really answer your question. I don't know, Shelley, if you have anything to add to
No, I
what
think
Philip said.
What Philip said is,
The other sticky problem is too, is that in the code update is you're also, a lot of the people who are existing, because, you know, nothing's been done since 1999. So pretty much everybody's grandfathered into the old standard until there's a change of use or a change of ownership. And so that's, and you know, it's Yamhill, so those things don't happen all the time. So you're kind of you're stuck with what you've got, so.
But you can think of this as, you know, what we wanna do is clean up the code so that future development looks like what we all want it to look like.
Like if you didn't want a gas station to happen on, you know, in the middle of town, that could have been addressed in code had it been updated since, you know, sometime between now and 1999.
it would give the city a good opportunity to say, you know, our code's been updated, these are the new standards, notify everybody.
Right.
And, you know, enforcement will, you know, commence or whatever, you know, make,
Right.
just notice, and then maybe that can be a fresh start, and
Right.
we'll still come up with some of the same obstacles, but at least there's a starting point.
And we can send some other letters from some of the other, you know, sort of like local agencies too, so just asking.
But I think it's important to remember that the other piece of this is opportunities, right? We're hopefully gonna be providing new opportunities to encourage development in downtown and to encourage different housing types. Sorry, Melissa, I didn't see your hand. Go ahead.
Oh, no, that's fine. You were kind of saying exactly what I was going to add to the discussion is I think the intent behind the updates is to really look at your land uses, so your comprehensive land use designations and then your zoning designations to allow for more types of development the way that your community needs and sees fit. It's not really directed at kind of like enforcement mechanisms or design standards necessarily, like who has a front yard full of peacocks and you're going to go after them. Like we wouldn't be in those kind of nitty weeds where somebody's going to have an enforcement situation maybe down the road. So it's really looking more broader scale at how you want your city to grow and the land uses and land use designations, if that's helpful.
That is, thank you.
But if something's zoned commercial and there's something in the code, and it's not being used for commercial purposes.
Right, so if you have, so typically in a central business district, residential is disallowed on the ground floor. It can be a use on the second floor or above, but the residential use in the commercial zone, obviously we would, you know, the city would wanna like do some outreach and tell people, hey, by the way, this is, you know, this is not compliant. You are not compliant. And it probably wasn't compliant back into 1999. It's just whether it was mentioned or not.
Well, you know, we have had code updates since 99, right?
Yeah.
So the last code update was in 2023.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that should be, you know, so it should be in there. It says, you know, disallowed on the ground floor in the CBD
So it actually
zone.
does. So in the central business district, overlay residence is only allowed on the second floor and only if the entrance is in the back 2/3. I mean, there's all sorts of details on what gets into that. And to my knowledge, there's only one building that qualifies currently with fire life safety issues being the Berkshire Hathaway exemption. But then above the sword and boards, there's one small apartment there. But Jeanette is correct. There's several properties that are commercial properties where there are people living on the first floor.
Right. Yeah, and so you know, basically you do the outreach and you say, hey, you're non-compliant. The other thing is that the people who have insurance on there, that's a commercial property. They're not insuring those as commercial properties. They're insuring as residential. So they're in violation of whatever their, you know, insurance is. And so it's educating people that, you know, you've got liability. If that burned down, nobody's like, you know, your insurance company's not rebuilding it for you because you're in violation.
However, there will be other instances where this is totally hypothetical, but let's say something currently is residential and the city decides to change that zone designation to commercial, then that house becomes what's called a non-conforming use, and they're allowed to continue on with that use until the house gets torn down and something else is built. And then, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's a non-conforming use. That's a little bit different than kind of what you were describing. So there would be a lot of different circumstances, each with its own unique conditions.
But I think also once you have somebody that's set up shop as a residence, you have a little more difficult time getting somebody to move along than if you set up
Exactly.
your kitchenware shop in somebody's house that was out of, that's a much easier process to,
100%.
at the state level, they don't wanna move people that are living somewhere.
Yeah, especially if they've been there for a while and no one's said anything.
Correct. Right.
Well, that's all I have for today. This was a great, I think like Melissa said, this has been a great start. Appreciate all the thoughts, and
I do have, before you finalize, I do have a question. Is any of this money coming from HUD, and is any of it gonna be, urban renewal type money that's going into the central core of the city?
since Melissa's still here, I'll let her answer that question.
Yeah, sure. Is it the question where the grant funds are coming from?
Yes.
So there's two separate grants, as was mentioned previously. They're both DLCD funded grants. One comes from the Housing Planning Assistant Grants Fund from DLCD's Housing Division. That's the larger grant looking at the residential portion. The second grant looking at the business district is a technical assistance grant from the Community Services Division at DLCD. So they're both DLCD funded grants. There isn't any urban renewal money attached to them, if that's helpful.
Not any urban
There is not.
renewal? Okay. Thank
We're
you.
really focused on the code, not any sort of development, actually doing development or redevelopment. It's really just kind of setting the stage for future development to happen in a way that the community wants.
Thank you.
And I'm going to have to take off now, but thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Shelley, anything else before we adjourn?
I don't think so. I think, just following that from here, you're gonna send the materials for everyone to review.
Correct.
And we're gonna get that information to you prior to meeting number 2.
Yeah, so probably early October. I'll give you a timeline, sure.
Just a deadline, and then I'll just get in touch with everyone as far as a meeting date for end of October, middle of October?
Towards the end of October.
Middle to end of October, and then we'll brainstorm some ideas for getting the word out for the public meeting.
Yeah,
Trunk
we
or
can
treat,
definitely,
Christmas
and
tree.
we'll draft like a postcard and share that with
I'll
you
share
in
that with
particular.
everyone. Yeah,
Okay,
we'll do that. All right, thank you.
thanks everyone. Great start
Thank you.
tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
So in the cover letter of the invoice I sent you, I made that table at the end. Was that helpful to kind of track
Yeah, it
the
was.
funds for each grant separately?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
So,
I hope I was just like, I hope this makes sense. It makes sense in my brain, but
I
that
mean,
doesn't
I'm
always.
gonna take a second look at it when I have more time, because I was kind of consumed with this meeting.